All right. Well, I guess we'll get started. So,
Yeah, let's do it.
I'm just going to give a quick introduction to the viewers and to yourself.
Yeah.
My name is Matt Beausoleil. I'm a culinary advisor, cook, and TV personality from Ottawa, Canada. I've cooked in different kitchens, catering, in-home dining, as well as in embassies and different fine dining establishments across the country. I've also done a lot of food TV, so I've been on the F Word on Fox with Gordon Ramsay, Diners, Drive-ins, and Dives. And 2 years ago, I got to produce and host my own TV show called Takinabite Ottawa, which is available on Bell 5 on demand in Canada. So this show is kind of a spin-off of that show, which is the Taking a Bite Meet The, and it was to meet the people and the leaders in the industry and share their stories and share some positivity in this time of need, let's say. Our industry is facing a really hard time, and my goal was to let people hear stories about people that inspire me and inspire others, and you're one of those people, of course. So, I'm a big believer in local food. I'm a big believer in donating time and time to charities, which is one of the things that you believe in as well. So, it seemed like such a fitting, you seem like such a fitting guest to join me tonight. So thank you for that.
My
So,
pleasure.
absolutely. So quickly, Andrew is a 4 times James Beard award-winning TV personality, chef, writer, teacher, social justice advocate, and in 2020 he makes his return to TV, which in February premiered on MSNBC What's Eating America, which I got to take in a couple episodes, which is really good. I really enjoyed it a lot. And then this fall you're launching a new show on Discovery Lifestyle. He's the creator, executive producer, and host of my favorite TV show ever, Bizarre Foods. Uh, and when he filmed those shows, so Bizarre Foods, Driven by Food, the Zimmern list, he's visited over 170 countries, which is pretty inspiring. He's the CEO of
We
Intuitive
gotta, we
Content.
gotta, we gotta bring back Bizarre Foods in a supersized way.
Yes, and I want to be
Yeah.
part of it. If we can
All
do
right.
that, I want to be part of it.
All right.
I'm totally on board.
Continue.
I,
Continue.
I, I'll
Sorry,
talk to you. I'll talk to
I
you a bit more
interrupted.
about that later. It's all good. So he's very devoted to charities. Like I said before, he sits on the board of directors and services for the UnderServed, Project Explorer, Soigne Hospitality and Taste of the NFL. He's the International Rescue Committee's voice for nutrition. Sorry, and his life's work is exploring and promoting cultural acceptance, tolerance, and understanding through food. Andrew, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join me today on Easter Sunday and to share this with all our viewers.
My pleasure.
So, like I said, I want to share some positivity and let people hear the story of the people that I'm presenting. So I'd really like to know what made you dive into the food industry.
I didn't have a choice. It was already wedded into me. I think it was inside my DNA. I don't remember a time in my life when I wasn't into it. In fact, there's a great picture that's on my wall in my office. I'm about 4 years old and I'm devouring a lobster, but not like normal people do. I actually look like an otter. Except I'm not on my back, crushing it
Yeah,
with my
well,
mouth
that's good.
and paws.
But you're
There's
sucking out the juices out of the head.
there's broken shell all over me. I'm a complete and total mess. And
Right.
it's a picture that my parents said that was the night that they realized that I was into food in a much different way than other people were. I can't remember a
Nice.
time in our family when we didn't travel to eat or eat to travel. And my parents very much observed a very strict rule. There was what was prepared for dinner, and there was not like a kids program.
That's right.
When we traveled and we ate in other homes or restaurants, there was the food that was served, and that's what we ate. And I think that was really, really important because it was stressed on me when I was a child that it was probably more important to be a good guest than it was to be a selfish eater in terms of, picking at
Yeah.
your salad or whatever.
Right.
And so I learned a lot of the principles about what was represented and still is in a lot of my TV shows from my parents, whether it's the social activism and political civic bent that we take on in What's Eating
Right.
America, or where I want to go when I'm in a town for a weekend and have 2+ days to dive into everything as we do in Zimmern's list, or Bizarre Foods, arguably the show that I'm most well known for. When I was young, my parents were divorced. My father, his mother loved to cook, and she would spend all of Friday and Saturday cooking to get ready for Sunday when the whole family would come over for dinner. She had two boys, and there were 5 male cousins. And, so we had, a lot of, hungry teens all at once kind of eating, and 2 very large sons of hers. Yeah. So, and she had a teeny little apartment on the Upper West Side. And so when I was 5 or 6, and, twice a month, I'd go and do a sleepover at grandma's on, Saturday night. So my parents, or my mother or my father, whoever's house I was at that weekend, would drop me off at grandma's, around lunchtime. I'd shop with her on Saturday afternoon up and down Broadway, which was a really cool deal to go into stores and specialty food stores, and, to go into, an appetizing shop with my grandmother in the 60s on Broadway in New York City, where the people behind the counter would, give me a little bissell of something was
kid?
quite extraordinary, and really set the bar for me. And then we went back to her kitchen in this tiny little apartment, and she would cook, and somehow 6-8 platters of food would be on the table by Sunday afternoon. And at a certain point, I was allowed to help her, and I don't mean this to sound gross. It's actually the thing that I remember most about my grandmother. She had the same apron. It wasn't like it wasn't like the farrier's apron that a lot of mixologists wear today, with big leather straps and a high front. It was a frilly waist down apron. And it had a little bib. It had a little bib that kind of covered her tummy, and she would wipe her hands on it all the time. And my grandmother's hands were always messy from handling roasted meats and things cooked in chicken fat. So there was like this brown circle of meat drippings and chicken fat in the middle of this apron that sort of, no matter how much she washed it, never went away.
Yeah, that grease wouldn't go anywhere.
Yeah, she was a big woman. And when she would hug me goodbye on Sundays, because I would leave after the big family meal with my dad or mom and get dropped back at the house, all I smelled was this just insane roasted chicken fat and roasted meat aroma.
Nice.
And I can, smell is a very powerful sense memory for us.
100%.
It is the strongest. And I've never forgotten that, and it's why I was just thinking about that. Is I talk a lot about that, and I find myself even yesterday and today I have a couple cherished skillets, and putting twice cooked potatoes in there and cooking them in chicken fat because it was Passover here this last week, and so I have rendered chicken fat both roasted and boiled in my refrigerator, and so I like to cook with them when I have the opportunity to, and it puts such a great flavor onto food, and just that smell.
Chicken fat's amazing.
It's the best.
It is.
And the smell in the kitchen now just reminds me of those wonderful times. So it was in me at a very early age. So I really didn't have a choice. I was over the last week or 10 days. A bunch of my college friends and I hopped onto several of whom I can see have hopped on and off our IG chat, actually.
Nice.
We started a text chain, and some of them were reminding me of, because it's 5 guys. We spend all our money on girls and drugs and booze, and we're living in an on-campus, off-campus house, and at Vassar College in Poughkeepsie, New York. And we would, we'd buy groceries for the week, and we'd run out after 3 days. And so on Sunday mornings when we got up, there was always 1 pack of ramen, a half a head of rotten broccoli, a pack of generic mac and cheese mix, some spices. It was just a bunch of horrible things and leftovers. And all all of my housemates would always joke about, you know, it was it was chopped before chopped, right? The mystery basket came out.
Yeah,
And
those are fun times.
what would we make for our meal when we woke up at 2 o'clock in the afternoon from a raucous Saturday night? So at every stop along the way, and summers, by the way, when I was in high school, summers, I begged my parents to let me work in restaurants. I didn't want to be working at the landscaper, hauling, you know, wheelbarrows of dirt.
Yep.
I wanted to be in restaurants cooking at night, and where I just thought it was the most exciting people in the whole world were food people. And the last 44 years of my life, since that summer I was 14, using that as my argument with my parents to let me work nights in restaurants, it's just been magnified. Food people are the most fantastic people in the whole world, and I'm just lucky that I've gotten to work with a lot of them over the years.
That's beautiful. It's funny. Even at a young age, we traveled a lot, right, with my parents too for food, and it's a big part of who I am and who I became. And my first job, I flipped burgers at a Harvey's burger joint in Canada, and I loved it. I manned that grill, and I did it like a champ. I was 14 years old, and I just loved it. Right?
Absolutely. Some of my best friends all started out as sandwich artists at Subway, you know, McDonald's, and the other fast fooders are still the #1 first job for young people in America. It's just connecting that way, and I'm not trying to promote a fast food burger. What I am promoting is that touching food and sharing it with another human being is transformative.
Yeah, it is. It totally is. And you know what I love about food is bringing people together, right? It brings everybody together: cultures, family, friends, even enemies. You can bring anybody to a table with food, and I love that. What has been your favorite part in the 44 years that you've been in the industry? What is the best thing that you've taken away from the food industry?
The people, and most particularly the way that community gives back.
Right.
When, you know, people sometimes don't understand that we don't get into this industry to get rich, right?
No.
There's a handful of people that I guess have. There is, we get into this industry because we see the magic that occurs when two people share food.
Yep.
Or 3 or 4 or 5.
Yeah.
And we see the connections that are made, and we want to supply more of that. That's what I think hooks us. Once you're in the food world, any aspect of it, you know, field to farm, anywhere on the supply chain, in or out of the restaurant, through the front door or the back door, right? Because there's a ton that comes in the front door, ton that goes out the back door. It's a massive part of, you know, America's GDP, of Canada's GDP. And when you compile the awesome economic engine of consumption, it's as much as 70% of our GDPs. And food weaves through all of that. But 100%. The thing that's magical is that once you're in the door on any part of that, and you see that, you know, if you're having a gala, small or large, right, you got to call the food people to supply some chow. It's the first call. When the World Trade Center went down, and the buildings crashed within 24 hours, because there were safety issues. But despite the fact that they were only letting police, fire, emergency responders with the proper breathing equipment and stuff because of the particulate in the air,
right,
on the fringes of the police line and on the inside of the police line, there were food people setting up grills, you know, getting, you know, boilers going with propane tanks.
100%.
I remember the images of John Currents, a friend of mine who's a chef based out of Mississippi. You know, Katrina hadn't even stopped raining. And, you know, he's standing on a milk carton, you know, with, you know, cooking for people. Food people understand how vital it is to put a bowl of something warm into someone's hand. It could be the most simple thing in the whole world. And I think that being a part of that is magical. Once I realized, you know, I was for a long time in my life, I was certainly a user of people and taker of things. I was very selfish and self-centered. That ruled my life. And then when I sobered up, 28 years ago, things began to change. And one of the things that I learned early on in recovery was that if you wanted to have any chance of staying sober and being happy, you had to be of service to your fellow human beings. And it took me about 6-7 years into sobriety before I was able to merge what I was learning in my personal wellness quest in recovery with my career. And then the minute that I did that, and I don't think it's coincidence, the minute that I did that, things really began to take off. I was, and I became actually happy with whatever my circumstances were. All the spiritual gifts that I had been looking for began to come true once I sort of co-regulated everything in my life, so that everything could sort of march along the same wagon train, 10 wagons wide instead of one after another. And I, as a way to navigate life, I think when you start to invest in other people, when you start to not think of yourself first and second, really amazing things begin to happen. It's a lifelong quest. I'm not perfect at it. I mean, I make mistakes all the day, and I burst out into a rash of crazy selfishness on a regular basis. But as long as you remember that, there's a quote that I have it drives all my friends crazy. I have 800 quotes on the bottom of my email signature, but there's one there that I'm working on the most right now, and that's the idea that if you don't have to take credit for something, you can accomplish anything. And that is a very, very it's a very powerful idea. And I have it first and foremost on that email chain, because that's the idea that I'm sort of most consumed with right now. So it's and that by the way, to get back to the whole point of your question, I learned that in the food space, working with food people. I didn't come up with that idea on my own. I learned that being part of a team in a kitchen and on a project making food, right? The Russians have a really great slogan. I can't say it in Russian, but the translation of it is, there are no generals in the banya. Now, the banya is the Russian steam bath where you take off all your clothes and steam and, beat each other with branches and stuff like that. And, there's no generals because you don't have a chest to pin any medals on, right? You're not wearing anything. So nobody knows what anybody else is doing, does for a living.
You're undercover.
But you're just sitting there. You're all in the same uniform. You're all standing around cutting boards, marching along with the day. You know what the goal is for service to get ready. That is that world where if we're not taking credit for it ourselves, right? It's a team win at the end of the night, right? I love that.
That's awesome. I
love what restaurants and what food teams and food people can teach us about life.
Beautiful. Those are great quotes too. I really appreciate those. Just a quick note. We're going to have a Q&A at the end of the show. At the bottom of your screen, right beside the comment box, there's a little square with a question mark on it. Please ask your questions in there. They'll be put aside for the Q&A at the end of the show. So let's just hop in quickly into some of your TV shows. So What's Eating America launched February 16th. Explores the most provocative social and political issues impacting voters through the lens of food. You want to share a bit about that show, or?
Yeah, it's something that we had been trying to sell really for 6 years. I felt that I'm a really keen student of television history, and I've always been a very keen student of food and the anthropology and sociology of food. It's essential history and how human beings interact with it. Yeah. And I realized, well, I thought 6 years ago, I said, people, we really need to do, I think the appetite for things other than food games and food demos, both of which I love, right? I'll sit down in front of the TV and every Thursday night I'm watching Top Chef just like the rest of the world. Love that show, right? I'll sit down and, hunker down in bed and, watch 12 episodes of Chopped in a row if I've got a cold and I'm under the weather, just like anyone else. I love watching food demonstrations where actual real chefs are cooking real food, right? That is that still enamors me. But I felt that with this food revolution that was happening in both of our countries, really at the same time, that there would be at some point, and you want to be ahead of the curve, right? You don't want to paddle into the wave too late. It breaks and it leaves you behind. So if you really want to time everything right, you want to make sure that you're diving down the wave at the right time so that you're the one riding this thing, all the way into the beach.
That's right.
And I thought that people would have an appetite if they're loving food, they're loving these stories, maybe they'd want to hear what's really going on behind the scenes when serious food people are talking about the issues of the day. And why food is a climate change issue and vice versa. Why health and wellness in our countries, more so in ours than yours, is a food issue and vice versa, right? Why immigration, more so in our country than yours, is a food issue and vice versa. Shameless plug for the nature of Canadian politics right now. In comparison, comparatively,
it's all good.
It is a fascinating thing to me, and I started thinking about this 6 years ago, and at the point in time, I couldn't get that show sold. 3 years ago, I tried again, couldn't get that show sold, and then a year and a half ago, I went back and took the third bite at the apple, and we had the right team. We had the right network. We had the right people believing in it. My production company was being led by a really, really strong group of fantastic doers. A lot of whom had a journalism background. So timing is everything, right? And
absolutely.
So,
my show was the same thing. It just happened because I was there at the right place at the right time.
And so I was 100%. able to make that show happen. What's fascinating to me is that the first 5 episodes aired in February and into March, and we've noticed that 4 of the 5 episodes all have continuing stories. This is how you know a show has legs. Those first 5 episodes were sort of broad looks at wide topics, and the next 300 episodes are going to be a lot tighter and more refined, not as sweeping. It's just how you roll out a show like that.
Of course,
is a little better to do it that way. But one thing that we've noticed is absolutely everything has become more important now. Every subject we touched, everything, just the immigration issue. Today's news is exploding with how we're taking care of immigrants in the food system or not taking care of them in the age of the coronavirus and how it's affecting our food supply chain. And the answers are huge. They're not good. So consequently, I think it's when you see that happening, you sort of did the right thing. With Bizarre Foods, complete, other side of the coin. I kept trying to sell this very sophisticated show about food and culture, and everybody said no for like 5 years. And I finally got in front of a gentleman named Pat Young, who at the time was running Travel Channel. And this is...
Thank you, Pat Young.
15 years ago. And he said to me, the show that you're describing is a PBS show that's got 8 great episodes and you'll win all the love and applause of your peers. He said, but if you can flip it around and give me 75% entertainment and 25% education, he says, I'll make that show. And if the audience likes you and we make it the right way, he says that show will be on for years and it will air in 100 countries. And the show ended up airing in 160 some odd markets for 12 plus years.
147
Pat
episodes.
was right. Pat was right. actually more than that. The way IMDb and some of those other places bracketed, they leave
you're
out
right.
Bizarre Foods
Specials and stuff.
America. Whole seasons of the show. In lifestyle TV, the dirty secret is, I mean, we made the same show for 12 and a half years.
Right.
What's really funny, and in some years we delivered as few as 20 episodes, in others as many as 36, I think was the most that we delivered in a year. But year 5, we called it Bizarre Foods America and just did domestic episodes for 2 years. And so technically they don't count that as a Bizarre Food season. Bizarre World, we made 16 of them, I think, one year. And everyone was like, title, exactly. So wherever that stuff is curated, all I know is it's something like just under 400 episodes of Bizarre Foods. Wow. I think it was over 500, something like 500 episodes of Delicious Destinations. It's kind of crazy. And
I watched lots of them, I'll tell you that.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yeah. I think that one of my favorite ones was Venice. Me and my wife went on I was hospitalized and sick in Dominican on our honeymoon, so we did a redo of our honeymoon, and I looked up your show about Venice, and we ended up going to the Osteria La Cantina for the raw fish platters, which was like, oh my God,
one of the ever. And that episode of Venice, an incredible behind the scenes story from that. One of the most talented videographers in America, Mike Simon, shot that show. We had been begging him because we had the friends of his were working on the show, and they were saying, Mike, just come on, just do one. And he was always working on NBC news stuff, presidential interviews, going with the president and on a trip to Russia, going and interviewing Putin. I mean, the big stuff. And he did the Lester Holt interview with Trump. Mike is a world-class shooter. Right. Well, he came with us and he shot the Venice show, which was fantastic. But the other thing that happened, the gentleman who is running my production company right now was field producing that episode. Okay. He stepped on sea urchins in the bay, and we had medical issues that popped up.
Yeah, I saw I remember your medic. You were dressed as a medic at one point in that show, I believe.
Yes, that's exactly right. We left him in the show, which was fantastic. But what I remember most was 2 down days in Venice that were never intended. The World Cup was on, and I think Italy made it into the round of 16 that year, and they were beat. Croatia made a great run that year. I think they made it into the round of 8 before they were taken out. Croatia was just a gutty team, and Croatia being right across the sea from Italy, they have a serious rivalry. And Croatia ended up beating Italy. I think they were the ones that knocked them out. So that night, it's like 4 PM. We're all out in the square cheering. It was an amazing game, and you realize that the Italians are. You have no idea in America how seriously people, like the whole country shut down for 48 hours after the loss. And our fixers said, well, we'll it was like a Tuesday. It said, okay, well, we'll see you. Sorry, it was a Sunday. They said, well, we'll start up again on Wednesday. And we're like, what do you mean? We're shooting tomorrow. We got Monday and Tuesday. We got stuff going on. He's like, well, even if we wanted to, no one's going to be showing up. The fishermen won't be showing up. The makers, the restaurant, like everything, it's down. Wow. Like people, it's 48 hours of national mourning, and we were just like, come on, really? And then you're living it. It was amazing. But Osteria La Cantina is one is still open, still the same staff. And all of those glorious restaurants in Venice, none more so precious to me than Alcovo that my friend Cesare and his wife Diane run.
That's right.
I have friends every month.
I didn't get to go there, unfortunately.
That go and visit them and a big hello. And that food is just Oh my God.
I'll have to do that next time I go.
No, it is seriously, it is food woody material. I mean, it's out of control, out of
I like
control good.
that. Food witty material. I like
Yeah.
that too. That's funny. And the other thing that was interesting in that show quickly was you talked about your love for horse meat. Do you still, is that something that you still like?
You know, it's funny. I was just talking about that last night with somebody.
Really?
Yes,
That is funny.
horse and donkey are without a doubt two of the most delicious meats that we are overlooking here in this country. Now, culturally, one of the things, you know, horses were domesticated.
That's right.
Long before our country was founded, right?
Right.
And so it's no surprise why we sort of push back. A lot of people push back from that. The donkey as well, right? In countries where they have a longer history than ours, over a couple hundred years, they eat that meat. And they have animals that are raised for riding. Right. And they have ones that are raised for food.
Absolutely.
And I tell people all the time, if I made a grilled donkey steak or horse steak for them from a luxury cut of that animal and put it down, they would say, "Oh my God, what is this? This is the best meat I've ever tasted." It has a much better balance of fat to lean because they don't finish those animals on grain. It's not overly fatty in the mouth, so it feels better. You feel better when you eat it. It grills up superbly. I'm actually a
big fan. I live in Quebec, and we actually have it in our grocery stores.
You do?
You do. So it's that's why I brought it up, because it's actually one of the meats that I actually enjoy, and you can get all the different cuts at every grocery store in Quebec, which is kind of interesting. Yep. But it's one of my preferred meats as well.
Donkey, and I will tell you this, which is, I mean, there's a whole town out on the fifth ring suburb in Beijing that has 100 donkey restaurants. People just go out there and eat donkey all the time. There's such demand for it. Donkey eats better than veal does. It's absolutely spectacular. Absolutely spectacular.
I would definitely try it. What about durian? Do you like durian?
I don't care for it. Look, I've tried it 16 different times, 17 different times.
Yeah.
I just don't care for it. I did the Indonesian embassy hosted me at an event. Still one of the most glamorous nights of my life. It was the prime minister. One of the national leaders was in Washington D.C. The embassy invited me down. I went. Big fancy affair, and they had 16 different dishes made with durian just for me, and I tasted all of them. And when it's used as an ingredient in stuff, it's absolutely fantastic. One of the chefs at the embassy did a roasted babi guling, a baby suckling pig.
Yeah.
And one of the condiments with it was a fermented durian sambal that was
fermented durian.
Out of sight. I would have that as a condiment with any meat. Really spectacular.
I remember seeing it on Bizarre Foods and thinking like, oh my God. And when I did my TV show, I actually went to an Asian supermarket and we did durian. And this was my impression of durian. That's what happened when I ate it.
Yeah, durian is one of those things that half the people that eat it just fall in love with it, and the other half it just tastes and not good.
I basically described it as onions and melon. I don't know. There's like natural gas.
Well, here's the thing. I always tell when people get in my face about it, I just say, look, I like fermented walrus anus. Okay, so if I'll eat that, you can let me not like durian and raw cookie
100%.
dough. I would rather eat durian than raw cookie dough. There's something about the uncooked all-purpose flour taste. The texture of it is sandy, and there are people who just are obsessed with cookie dough, like my son. If he's watching, turn this off. You're up too late. Get back in bed. It is some people just love it. I'm not a fan.
Right. All right. So we'll kind of wrap up this part. So be on the lookout for in October. You have the show coming out on Discovery Life Channel. Is that announced? What show is coming out on Discovery Life Channel in October?
No.
Okay, perfect.
I will
Stay
say
tuned.
there is a new we have a show that my company has produced that is coming out on one of the Discovery networks that's unannounced. We have another show that I'm in that will premiere in the fall on an as yet announced Discovery network as well.
All right. Well, that was that was not insider information based on what I was told. So
Yeah.
all right, we'll just move along. Thanks for all your
and hopefully we're
on that.
yeah, I think we're going to be. I'm pretty sure we're by the end. Well, hopefully shortly we'll know that we're. I think we're going to be making a lot more What's Eating Americas, if that's the proper plural there.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I love telling stories. That's what I want to do, is tell stories about food.
I love it too. Yeah, it's great. Well, if you ever want some help with bizarre foods too, let me know. I'm in.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Matt.
All right, so let's hop into the topic, of this time. So the current state of our industry. Some of the biggest headlines coming out of Canada. So 10% of Canada's 98,000 restaurants don't plan to reopen already after this COVID-19 crisis. Nearly 2/3 of our industry, or 800,000 employees, are out of work. Some restaurants have changed their models from a excellent sit-down restaurant to a takeout and delivery restaurant, which is not very sustainable for them, but they have to do something to try and keep afloat. Your wisdom and knowledge in the industry.
I would interrupt you right
there.
Yeah. The reason that most places have turned to a delivery and takeout model is because restaurant people want to take care of their own. So if you can hold on to a percentage of your employees and make a percentage of those employees' families whole during this time, then you do it. It barely begins to pay the fixed costs, your rent and all that other stuff, right?
Exactly.
The profit margin on having someone in the restaurant itself sitting down wasn't so great over the last 20 years, right? It's shrunk from,
margins are huge.
When I started out in this business, restaurants made, a good restaurant brought 20 to 15% to the bottom line. Now that number is, hovers between 5 and 10%.
That's right.
And, people are unwilling in either of our countries to actually pay the true cost of what it takes to put the food on the table, which is one of the inequitable structures of many that has, boondoggled restaurants, for the last 15, 20 years. So, which is the reason that 10% number is so important. There are so many folks, because I believe the same number holds true in our country, probably even more. Because I think in so many of our cities, we actually have had too many restaurants for a while.
Right,
I mean, there's a bubble, a food bubble that's just grown. And a lot of us had predicted it popping this year at some point. And then the coronavirus pandemic, this catastrophe, has burnt our house to the ground. So one of the issues is that, a lot of restaurants won't reopen. They are going to have to rethink business models. Socialization activities as human beings, we and I mean this in the scientific sense, we respond to other cues, both individually, in our families, in our communities, nationally, globally, how we respond and react to things. This is the first time in many lifetimes that we are dealing with a global catastrophe that we all are experiencing, right? I'm talking about the vast amount of Americans, Americans, Canadians, whomever, right? Everyone. So what's going to happen, what's going to come out of here is a different relationship with food. Now, on one side, people are realizing, because you're hearing it every single day, oh my gosh, what was I doing putting in those extra hours at work? I want to be home with my kids, right? People are, a very famous psychologist was on, not practicing anymore. I guess she's she's a psychologist, who now teaches. Her name is Dr. Pamela Paresky. I was interviewing her, getting some download about how people socialize and how that may shift in this day and age to get ready for something that an article that I'm writing for a magazine this week. And, you know, one of the things that she reminded me was a lot of people are learning that to figure out what makes them happy and lean into that, right?
Right.
And sometimes it takes a horrific tragedy like this one that we're all
100%.
enduring, real trauma, to make us realize what we want. I wish that we could learn those lessons without doing it through the vehicle of pain, but sadly, pain is so often, tragedy is so often the biggest change maker in our lives. I don't like the idea that, you know, there's a dad and a mom, hardworking, 2-income family, 2 kids, living right around the corner from me in Minnesota, that have to like lose their livelihoods and scraping it together every night with their, you know, teaching their kids, you know, sharing the one computer. I mean, you know, just an average American family.
It's reality,
they don't have a lot. And quite frankly, the mom and dad are at night saying to themselves, what are we going to do 2 weeks from now if that government check doesn't arrive, right? I mean, they're facing real hardship. But what they're both saying to each other too is, God, but we've realized the value of having each other and spending time together. People are changing their minds and attitudes. Are they going to go out as much? When restaurants do reopen in our countries, they're definitely going to be reopening into a recession, perhaps a global depression. Depends on how long things happen, where the rebound is. So restaurants are going to have to change the way they work. The consumer's interaction with how we deal with food is going to change, right? I remember watching Blade Runner when it came out, and the Ridley Scott movie. And I'm a big fan of the original Blade Runner. And I saw it about 12, 14. I watch it every 3 or 4 years. And I was watching it about 10, 12 years ago. And I remember remarking to some food friends of mine the next day, that's what food is going to look like in 2040. And they said, what do you mean? And I said, well, it looks like this dystopian universe looks like a night in a crazy neighborhood in Tokyo. And I'm like, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, at one point he's walking down the street in the rain and he goes by all of these, they all have Asian signs, and it's a tempura shop and a yakitori shop. And, you know, in Japan, they sort of specialize in these restaurants that are single item eateries, right? You feel like tempura, you go to a tempura restaurant, right? And there are not many restaurants. They usually cater to tourists where you can get a little bit of everything, right? So those food sites, and I thought to myself, you know, that's the model that a lot of people are going to be leaning into, something that can be controlled with a low number of workers, where you're not going to interface with the server. The food's going to be delicious, right? It's going to be less expensive.
Specialized. It'll be special too, right? It's
going to be less expensive for the consumer. Maybe that's what we're all going to face. And maybe what we call tablecloth restaurants now are going to be 100% special occasion. I don't know. We don't know, because things are not only changing every single day based on the news cycle, but we are so far away, really so far away, based on how this is changing from how it's going to look when we come out on the other side. In America here, we're really, you know, 4, 5, 6 weeks into this thing. And if we continue to stay closed as a country in different states, whatever, for another 2 to 3 months, right, which is entirely a possibility, and I'd rather stay down for longer to ensure that we don't have a second go round with this that would really cripple us economically. I want to make sure that when we come out of this, we're really ready to engage our economic engine again. And I just think there's so much we don't know yet. And this touches on the core of the issue.
Accurate, yeah.
Uncertainty is the most scary thing for modern human beings. We deal less well with uncertainty than anything else. So many of us have had life experiences, you know, horrific ones, losing parents. Everyone does at some point. Fighting in wars, being lost, horrific sicknesses. I mean, whatever it may be, right? But when you have a mass global pandemic, the one thing that we are all enduring at the same time is uncertainty. And that is the most dangerous thing of all. And that uncertainty is going to extend for quite a long while. I think the more we understand about this virus, the more certainty we will get, which is why I am all about testing, and mitigation so that we can figure out how this thing moves. Because I think that's going to give more people just a little bit of certainty.
Exactly.
I posted something on my Instagram called Peace of Mind, Peace. I won't bug everyone. But if you go to my Instagram page, it was posted on Friday. I'm at chefaz on Instagram. And you can see there this thing that I give a little 10-minute talk on how to navigate uncertainty, as some of my learning gurus have taught me, towards happiness by using empathy as a tool. And then I have a tool for latching on to the empathy card, which is a very difficult one for a lot of people to play. But the bottom line is there is going to be more certainty. It just isn't coming tomorrow.
Right. And you're right. I mean, more testing and more assurance. I mean, if we can get those ICU numbers down, and if they have some treatments discovered or whatever, it's going to change things drastically, and it'll create that comfort and kind of reduce that uncertainty, right, as to what the next steps will unfold. So in closing on that, how do you think people can best help support our industry? Diners.
Well, the best thing that you can do, if there are restaurants around you that are doing takeout, right? By all means, as long as everyone is staying safe, that's a great thing to do. I believe in growing where you're planted. So there's lots of 100%. National organizations, right? No Kid Hungry, a great one, right? Feeding America, another great one, right? Of dozens of national organizations that are doing incredible great work and making sure that money is going to those that need it. But if you go on to your own towns, I mean, all you have to Google is your city and help restaurant workers. There are hundreds and hundreds of pop-ups that are all happening, micro locally. I'm hard pressed to think of a restaurant, even in Minneapolis and St. Paul right now, that doesn't have its own fundraising mechanism. If it's your favorite restaurant, you can give directly to employees, right? Community tip jars, right? These are fantastic mechanisms. The other thing is that local food shelves, people who already have the existing mechanism to feed those who are hungry, because remember, hunger is skyrocketing right now. Unemployment is skyrocketing. When you take away bread and rice, that's the stuff that causes blood to run in the streets. I am not advocating for it. I am just pointing out a historical reality, right? I am praying that we get enough money soon enough into the system, and by that I mean the local food shelves and the people who are cooking food and giving it to the needy, like World Central Kitchen, right? Great example. It is crucial that we make sure that there is enough food in all of our neighborhoods before people start doing things for food and that kind of social unrest can get really, really, really dicey. We're working very hard in Minnesota to gear for that here. The New York Times today, a lot of other papers too, are all reporting on the food crisis as the food chain starts to get affected by this. They just closed the largest pork processing plant in America, one of the Smithfield plants, because it has become a hotbed for C-19. People have forgotten that our food workers have been forced to cluster in groups in unsafe ways under harsh living conditions to continue to put food on the plates of Americans and Canadians. And so what is shocking to me is these people that we've kept in the shadows for decades. The missed opportunity was immigration reform in this country, right? And now the chickens are coming home to roost. Bad metaphor. But we have marginalized those people for so long. Then we deemed them essential and emergency workers here in America and forced them to keep working. And these are people, by the way, hourly wage earners, no health insurance, no paid sick leave, no motivation, right, to go to the emergency room if they weren't feeling well. Their biggest motivation is to try to collect a check and send it home. And our failure to support food workers in the supply chain, farmers, meat packers, drivers, fishermen, right? Our failure in America has been not taking care of them. One of our failures over the last month, and sadly, we're going to be paying that price for the next couple of weeks. We have to get our arms around. We have to get our arms around this issue right away.
Yep. You know, and we have to be very grateful for all those people that are still working for us, right? And giving us the food and letting those restaurants have food to serve us.
I'll tell you something. I'm not proud of this. My son always points out to me that I get triggered whenever I'm dealing with someone at a counter, right? Airline counter, hotel check-in. I would extend that to the, oh my God, hurry up, I'm trying to get out of the supermarket vibe, right? I'm talking historically in my life. These days in the supermarket, even though I can't, I want to hug every person in there. I am the nicest customer in that supermarket every time I go in there, because you know the young kid who's still packing the groceries, the young people that are still working the checkout aisles, the people who are restocking the stuff. I mean, they're there so that we can still put food on our families' plates.
I know. And that eating, you have to be grateful to. Go ahead.
No, go on.
I was saying you have to be grateful to them, their families, their parents. Like these parents are letting their kids go out in this storm of, you know, infection and virus, and to help us and help other people, right? And that again brings back the whole aspect of how important food is, right? Those people are so important. It's the high school student that's cashing you out at the store that's taking the risk of contracting COVID, and but they're there for us to eat.
For those of us, by the way, that still can go to a supermarket.
Fair enough.
You have to remember that eating well in America is a class privilege. There are so many people that do not have access to a supermarket regularly or at all.
Right.
And we are desperately, it's why the need in our food banks for hot prepared food has gone from X number of thousand meals a day here in Minnesota to 100,000 meals a day here in Minnesota, because we have to take care of all those people that can't make it to the supermarket.
Right. Well, special shout out to all the people who help still sell food to us. All the volunteers out there, all our healthcare workers. You know what? If you guys weren't doing what you were doing, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing here tonight, right? So special shout out to you guys. All right, so let's hop into the Q&A. Let's see what kind of questions we got here. So got some interesting ones. Somebody wants to know if you like coffee or tea. I'm not sure why.
Both. I drink coffee in the morning, and then sometimes I'll have a second cup. But I drink a lot of tea. I have a bin in my cupboard with ungodly amounts of tea in it. I love tea. Tea comes in so many different shapes and sizes.
Tea's awesome.
It's once you start to discover it, and over the course of my lifetime traveling, it's been quite amazing.
Let's see. Hi, Chef. This is Matt Sachs from Baltimore. When you were in Israel, what were your thoughts on the food, and have you been back since?
I go to Israel a bunch. I love The food there is absolutely fantastic. You know, the food of the entire Levant, right, it is very similar. There are differences culturally in what certain countries have learned to eat over the last 300, 200, 100, or 50 years. Right. Have been socialized to, but you have to remember the entire Levant at one time was one big expanse with no maps on it. You know, white Europeans drew the lines on the maps, right? And so, you know, a lot of the foods that I love, that I eat when I'm in Israel, are the same ones that I used to eat when I was in Syria, or when I'm lucky enough to go to any of the other, you know, half dozen countries that I'm privileged enough to be able to travel, or was able until this thing shut everything down, into. Whether it's in the, you know, any of the Emirati countries or Jordan or etc. The food in that part of the world is spectacular, and was having a bit of a moment in the restaurants, at least in our country. And we have some incredible chefs to thank, who are sort of at the tip of the spear, pushing that food forward. But, you know, incredible Palestinian chefs, Israeli chefs, you know, Lebanese. The food of the Levant is absolutely addictive.
Right. All right. What is your favorite food?
My grandmother's roast chicken. I make it at least once a week. The onions burn in the fat from the chicken drippings. I make my pan gravy from that. Nice. And that is a once a week. It's probably the most frequently consumed food that I have here.
Nice. Awesome. All right. So we'll finish the Q&A with what impact do you hope you've had on people because of all the work that you have done?
Wow.
Yeah, it's a good one.
That's heavy.
It is heavy.
What would I hope? I mean, you're talking about legacy with someone who's not, you know, my goal is to die in the saddle. I don't want to stop doing what I'm doing until, you know, I mean, with my last dying breath. And I don't plan on that ending anytime soon. But I would hope, and this is actually changed for me over the last couple of weeks. I've not been making TV. I've closed restaurants. I've closed businesses of mine. It's, you know, I'm dealing with the same thing that everybody else is dealing with. And I'm in my pajamas still since I woke up this morning, like so many of you. I would have answered this question differently in December. Here's what it is. At the end of the day, what my friend Dr. Paresky said, I think, is really, really important. What makes you happy? Lean into that, right? And what makes me happy, because I'm constantly consumed with thoughts about myself. I mean, that's been my biggest problem in life, is just too much of me. And when I'm doing things for other people, I'm right-sized. And I know that sounds, like a Hallmark greeting card, but I would rather be right-sized and not worrying about all those other things that have just plagued me my whole life, than chasing after all those bright, shiny objects that this experience has put in perspective for me. You know, my son is in a boarding school in Utah, and I haven't been able to see him. He comes home every month. I go there every month, you know, so I get to see him a lot. He was home in January. That was the last. We had to cancel the February trip. We had to cancel the March trip. Obviously, now we're in April. This is the longest I've gone without seeing my child in my life. All I want to do, if I got one wish, would just be, you know, I just want to give my son a hug. That's really, it's all I need to be happy right now. And this really puts it all in perspective, right?
It does.
What makes you happy? Find that, lean into it. And I do believe that our purpose in life, the reason that we're here, is to be of service to our fellows and to love other people. Focusing on that, I think, allows us to maintain our dignity and respect as we dose it out to other human beings. I think we've lost a little bit of that. So, yeah, that's how I would answer that. I still love sharing
That's a great
food.
answer.
I mean, that's the secret sauce, right?
It is the secret sauce.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that concludes our show. So thank you very much for joining me, Andrew. Thank you for sharing your story, sharing some good stuff, and hitting on the tough topics. And your perspectives are obviously greatly appreciated, and your knowledge of the industry and the work that you do don't go unnoticed. So thanks again. Hopefully, when this is all over, we can grab a meal one time.
Yes. No. Absolutely.
That would be awesome. I'd love to do that.
1,000%. Well, the food where you live is pretty darn good.
It is. So I'll go there. You can come here. We'll figure that out.
Okay. All right.
All right.
We'll high five in the air.
We shall.
Thank you to all the people that tuned in. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So thanks a lot to you guys. Thanks for joining us on this Easter Sunday special. It's been a pleasure to host you all here tonight. So in closing, stay home, stay safe, and remember, we're all in this together. Cheers.